BoneSnapper, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Chapter 1. An Ordinary Night. She listens to the engines snapping bones. The corpses stretch for miles. A battle on a graveyard on a battlefield, dark and stormy. Flagstaffs snap in the wind and fall, fluttering into ruin. Distant spears standing like swamp reeds quiver in the entrails of dying soldiers. Gunsmoke hangs low, acrid, mingled with the fog. The Necromancer moves ungracefully over jagged peaks and troughs of compacted bones and rot. The gunfire resounds in the distance, cracking against the horizon. A tattered robe, gauntlets of gold and silver scratching in the heap. Others are skittering in the darkness, fires burning, wails, moans, and laments. She picks through the clutter, holds a bone, contemplates it, tosses it. She looks at skulls in the eye sockets, listens and scrapes her fingers over the craniums, one by one. They smile at her, but she rejects them. Crack, 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 the gunfire is coming. The roar of engines and men. The ghoul guards are tracking. Society soldiers patrolling the destruction, tasked with scattering the ghouls that come to feed on the heroic dead. A farce, just a sport for them. The ghouls feed on the rotting flesh of the dead. They suck the marrow from the bones. They're hated, but they're necessary. Like buzzards and beetles, they perform their work. But the soldiers, unable to accept the fate that awaits them, spit lead and fire at the scavengers. They hunt the ghoul clans across the wastes to pass the time between raiding, marauding, and eventually killing each other. There, amidst the rubble of carcasses and war things, she sees a sword hilt protruding. Curious, perhaps careless, she pulls at it. She is not a scavenger, looter, or ghoul. She can appreciate the craftsmanship. The sword resists her pull. It's lodged in a ribcage. Frustrated, she shifts her weight and pulls. The bones break loose, opening some pocket of sealed gas. And partly bubbling, partly popping, the ooze releases its pressure, and she topples over with the bones, and she hears the song of the dead, the hush of goddesses weeping in her mind, the resonating of fate, the vibration of serendipity. Swooning from the song, she stands over the twisted, disarticulated form disgorged from the pit and knows she has found her materials. The gunfire approaches. Hastily, she fills her sack with all the bones she can find. The body is partially interwoven by rotting sinew and remnants of leather armor. She may have missed some pieces or got a few extra, but time was of the essence. The sack made full, she slung it and trudged over the hill, towards the limit of the field. The noxious gases already swimming in her nostrils, permeating the floral-beaked plague mask she wore for protection. The searchlights of the vehicles wash over her. They kill anything in front of their mounted guns, swiveling, drooling, scanning round and round. She scurries over the peak and mostly slides down the other side, dislodging offal, half sticking in the muck, dragging her sack behind. She somersaults at the last drop and tumbles into fracas. Grey forms leap and scatter. Gaining her feet, she finds the ghouls all around her. They were fleeing the hot bite of the guns. The ridge of bone provided some protection, but the ghouls gathering there could only mean one thing. They were being driven. The ghouls, seeing she was but small and not prone to indiscriminate shooting, regarded her only as a nuisance. They hurriedly picked through the refuse for something wet. They were gaunt and long-limbed, but not tall. Malnourished, but they were otherwise human, and that human form, reduced to craven carrion eaters, was what offended the hunters the most. What caused their condition? Was it radiological, biochemical, metaphysical? No one knew for sure. They had been people once, though. Since the last cataclysm, called the Grind, extradimensional continents scraped past each other, aligned for a time, cutting swathes into each other before parting into the ethereal electromagnetic storm. The war came, the guns came, and then the ghouls. How long ago? A century, maybe. Some bones had fallen from her sack. She gathered them, but one of the long bones was snapped up by a ghoul in its jackal-like mouth. The off-white fangs flashed in the darkness. The ghoul clicked and snarled. It was not strong enough to break the bone, but perforated it with indentations. Female, young, clothed in scraps of fallen banners, barely covering her deteriorating body, not rotting like the dead, but wasting. Her hair fell like willow vines over her face. The more ravenous the ghoul, the more the face elongates, and the eyes wax and glow, predatory in the night. The necromancer thrust herself at the ghoul, determined to have her prize. Ghouls are feral and strong, but not apt to fight. The talons of her metal gauntlets drove the ghoul back, dropping the bone in a smattering of saliva. But this drew attention. The other ghouls began to circle, suspicious of the bulging sack, wanton. They did not move swiftly, but shambled, conserving energy, turning ears first towards her in a jilted motion. Not helpless, but outnumbered, the necromancer broke for an opening in their encirclement. She bounded over a pile of bones to find a steep drop on the dark side of the heap. She rolled over the knobs and splinters 5 or 6 times until the decline flattened enough for her to regain her footing. The eyes of the ghouls shone down from the hilltop, floating like fireflies in the misty dark. With no clear escape, the necromancer spied a hollow depression below a chance conjunction of ribcages. She dove under it and summoned the nearby bones to pile over her, creating a cloak of rot to conceal her from the snarling ghouls. Uncomfortable among the sharp edges of snapped limbs and rusting blades, the necromancer could hardly see through her own disguise. She listened between each breath as the sounds of her own organs seemed a cacophony in the enclosure. There was a long quiet until she heard the scratch of ghoul claws clacking over the terrain. She could only see shadows darting and twisting, and occasionally feel the weight of the creatures as they stepped unawares onto her bone blanket. Their barks were frustrated and confused. Ghouls were not fools. They were human enough to know that meat doesn't just vanish. The female ghoul perched like a vulture on a spindle of metal to survey the narrow valley. Looking as though through a keyhole, the necromancer watched the scavenger sniff left and right, short and sharp, snorting, even tasting the air with her black tongue. Her head clicked 1 degree ever closer in the necromancer's direction. It smelled her. Somehow, through the oppression of decay and filth, the ghoul tracked her scent. Others circled under her, likewise licking the night for a sign of prey. The necromancer tried to stay calm, to stay quiet. She wore sharp gauntlets to pierce and scrape. The bright eyes made easy targets, but would it be enough? She could tear the eyes and throats out of 2, maybe 3 before they overtook her, piled onto her, and sank their teeth and claws into her softest parts. She had to stay calm, stay quiet. How long since they gorged on fresh flesh? It would be a frenzy. Her guts would be sucked from her belly before she had time to die. She had to stay quiet. But there was no way to stop the smell of her body from leaching through the shawl of ribs. What smell? What smell? Pleaded the ghouls, curling back their lips to inhale deeper. The strength of a ghoul was its pack. However much they squabbled amongst themselves, each knew when any had found meat, shelter, mate, or plaything. The young female didn't answer right away, either unwilling to share or unable to identify. Her head tilted sideways, dropped, and rotated like an owl. Bitter, sweet. The others hopped and somersaulted and slapped the ground. One small ghoul squatted atop the necromancer's chest, waiting to see what the others would do. The drool from its panting dribbled between the crevices of the bones and dabbed the necromancer's neck and face. It was cold. Close. Very close. Then the zip and sting of bullets split the air. Engines belched over the stack, and came crashing into the clearing. Guns fired wildly, pelting ghouls, evaporating them into reddish mist and bone shrapnel. The crushing tread of the vehicle mounted a bulge and came down hard. The Necromancer burst from her shelter and barrel-rolled for cover under the vehicle as it cranked to the side, chasing the ghouls as they fled. Now with the hunters between her and the ghouls, the Necromancer dashed from the scene with her sack of bones over her shoulder and her guts yet unsucked.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.